I've got another story following up on the FDA and MAPS and Lykos and their MDMA research. FDA has given a thumbs down to MDMA for now, demanding further research. On Friday, drug maker Lykos Therapeutics received word from the FDA that the agency had decided not to approve MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. Instead, the agency asked the drug maker to further study the safety and efficacy. Heavily anticipated announcement came in the form of a complete response letter from the FDA to Lykos. It represents a significant setback for the company and the broader movement to bring psychedelics into the healthcare. A huge blow to the field, said Dr. Boris Heifetz, anesthesiologist at Stanford University whose lab studies psychedelics. Lykos said it plans to request a meeting with the FDA to ask for a reconsideration of the decision. Lykos' CEO, Amy Emerson, probably getting fired soon, called the FDA's request for another phase 3 trial deeply disappointing and said conducting the study would take several years. He added that many of the requests from the agency can be addressed with the existing data, post-approval requirements, or through reference to scientific literature. Treatment had garnered considerable support from patients, leaders in the field of mental health, psychedelics, and politicians from both parties. In recent weeks, advocates mounted a major public pressure campaign emphasizing the dire need for new and effective treatments for veterans and the other millions of people, affected by PTSD. Many in the psychedelics industry had viewed this as a pivotal moment. FDA decision on MDMA could be seen as a bellwether for other drugs that are in the pipeline, like psilocybin and LSD, which are both considered classic psychedelics like MDMA. Dr. Mason Marks believes the FDA's decision doesn't spell trouble for the broader field, as the agency is signaling that it is open to psychedelic research. I think this is a unique case, says Marks, a law professor and senior fellow with the Project on Psychedelics Law and Regulation at Harvard's Law School, Triflorum Center. I don't think there's any sign that progress is going to be slowed. Anything, it might intensify because the other companies might see an opportunity to really get in there and compete. Wave of enthusiasm around MDMA's therapeutic potential has come from research scientists at top academic centers and even the Department of Veterans Affairs. Supporters of the drug were dismayed by Friday's decision. The FDA's decision is disgraceful, said Heroic Hearts Project, a veterans org that had lobbied for FDA approval, citing that many veteran suicides in a statement, This is the epitome of bureaucratic red tape, and the result is people will keep. In a press release, Lykos said the FDA echoed the issues raised by that committee, of that story I had brought up before. The committee's downvote put the FDA in a tricky spot, given that it historically sides with the advisors. I was hoping to see MDMA make it to market, argue that concerns about the quality of the research were overblown, and in some cases focused on issues of study design that weren't unique to MDMA. Trials undoubtedly had problems, said Stanford's Heifetz, but the FDA could have dealt with these concerns by approving the treatment with strict restrictions around how it's administered and a requirement of a post-market study. Worries that the decision to deny approval will stifle innovation and funding into other novel treatments, including MDMA-like drugs that are being developed. It's not the end of the road for Lykos. It will cost them financially, but it doesn't mean that they can't ultimately succeed. Optimism around the treatment largely stems from the company's promising phase 3 clinical trials, which together enrolled about 200 people. The most recent, published last year, showed over 70% of participants no longer met the diagnosis criteria for PTSD after only 3 therapy sessions with MDMA, compared to 48% by the same talk therapy protocol, but took a placebo. Follow-up research from the company showed participants were still benefiting from the treatment at least a half a year after their last dosing session. I think this is a bit of a disappointing speed bump, but I don't think it's anywhere near the end of the road because I think we're seeing a ton of positivity from MDMA. I think this really points to, when we look at that earlier story, this really points to the need for those undergoing psychedelic studies with these molecules and substances that have been really demonized and villainized, need to be much more rigorous than a standard scientific study in order to get this stuff through. Last thing I'd like to add is, best way, I think, forward for all of this is for us to close our overseas military bases, support our troops by bringing them home to work on food forests, bridges, and other infrastructure in the United States. And if we don't send them across the world to murder innocent people so we can steal their shit, we won't have to deal with as much PTSD moving forward. I respect the people that served. I don't think that they are bad people. I think most of them were leveraged by a system out of their control. I think the truest form of support is peace, and compassion, a positive way forward. Take it away, High at 9 crew.
Well, I think MDMA and the FDA are showing that we can put the genie back in the bottle because, once again, we've talked about how this was used in psychotherapy years and years ago and in marriage counseling and things like that. So it sucks that they're willing to take steps back like this on something that can really help people.
It's a huge blow for the electronic dance music industry as well.
Oh, man. I mean, Sean has some super insight into this. And Sean, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, I take it from our, not to, just to add on to what St. G, our local hippie, said, and I appreciate what he had to say about the veteran. But a couple things that people aren't talking about, they need to. First, this is unique because this wasn't just about MDMA. Rick, from the very beginning, had an idea of putting therapy into it. So this was therapy-assisted MDMA, and that was probably the big, dagger through the heart in this. And what I mean by that is, over the weekend, the pharmacology, the publication that published the research retracted 3 MAPS studies, and not for good reasons. And if we want to look at the reasons that we were given, it's failure to report and acknowledge well-publicized sexual assault at a study site, 9 non-blinding due to subjects with prior MDMA experience. The non-blinding issue is a huge issue with psychedelics because you kind of know if you've been given the placebo or not. And then there's significant ethical concern regarding the biased data reporting, and that's what killed the actual approval. And interesting enough, we did see a very well-financed activism pushed in the last few weeks. And I just, my experience is the FDA is not going to answer to that. And politicians, the FDA is about approving it based on quote the science. We know the jokes about the FDA, but I didn't find that very helpful. The other thing I think needs to be talked about is veteran exploitation, and I think our friend St. G talks about that a bit. But some of the hysterics we saw, Heroic Hearts wrote, Canadian board member who's not even a vet, which I don't know, wrote a letter to Symposium, which is one of the publications that had written some of the articles about the sexual assault and everything. And she got tons of death threats and horrible, attack because people like Dan Crenshaw are very willing to use the veteran card when it benefits them while ignoring the veterans in a lot of other areas. So I just think all around this has become a total mess. I think it does hurt and set back MDMA as a medicine a long time. And I think the path forward is let MDMA stand on its own legs without therapy. Does it help or does it not help? I mean, MDMA was developed in 1912. I actually disagree with Yarrow. I know he's joking. I think this is a huge boom for the electronic dense community because now that's the place you're going to still get MDMA. It's not going to be from Lycos. Mm-hmm. Just so everyone knows why people are upset about this, because it's not talked about. MAPS and developed Lycos. It was the nonprofit, the for-profit. They rebranded with Lycos. Lycos was going to be able for 5 years to have a monopoly on all MDMA scripts. And they were going to send it to the therapist, but the therapist had to have a MAPS training certificate that cost $10,000 and multiple hours. It was $200 at first, and they lowered it, of a MAPS supervised trainer. So there was a lot of money to be made, and $300 million approximately was raised by Lycos to push this. It's going to cost them another $100 million now to do the science they're talking about. And I think there's real questions about therapy-assisted MDMA, whether or not it's even feasible to get that approved through the FDA. And I think we all have to wonder if it is. So bottom line is we still have the black market, the illicit market, whatever you want to call it. And that's unfortunate part about it, because the safe use of drugs is the clean use of drugs. And that's a huge issue with fentanyl. And so it's just sad all around. And I think people need to take a look at Rick and Ethan Nadelman and what he did in California and really evaluate how we've had the privilege to lead this drug renaissance, the past 20 years in cannabis and other. And maybe there's some downside to giving them a monopoly because they have the money to fund it. And that's all I got to say. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Wow. And wow. What do you have to say about that, Mathieu St. Germain? That sounds like they were trying.
I'm in complete harmonious agreement with Sean. And again, I think that I was just disappointed that Rick and the MAPS crew have been working on this for 25 plus years and bobbled right before the touchdown. They should have been
You don't think they were trying to exploit? You don't think they were trying to exploit this whole thing so that they could just drive profits for themselves?
Oh, every one of us is caught in this capitalist system, and the downside of this capitalist system, or one of the really neat features, is every single one of us can be torn apart for insincerity and will to profit. There is no way in this current system to actually navigate successfully without finding some way to capture or garner some profit, unless one wants to live on BLM land, utilize their primitive skills to hunt and live in a primitive debris hut. So, yeah, they were trying to make money off of it, but that's what Don the Con and your Republican lovers are all about, Jason. So,
did you say debris hut? Because that sounds like real estate to me. I can help viewers with that.
Yeah, I said debris hut, bro. Maybe that's your new job, is going in on BLM debris huts, Yarrow.
You should go to
Thailand. A beautiful one made from pine cones and old rabbit skins. Yeah, the biggest thing is we need to change the structure of our society from the ground up. I know everybody wants to fall back on their cynicism and say, oh, it's always been this way. It's always going to be that way. Well, you guys, guess what? That's not actually true. The U.S. was a colony of Britain until the day that it wasn't. France had a king forever until the day that it didn't. Russia had a czar forever till the day that it didn't. Anything can change on a dime. If we come together with our love, our humanity, and our shared family vibe, envision a new future and work for it, it can change on a dime. Well, then, man, everybody's in the capital system. We all got to make money.
The issue isn't even that. The issue is the Controlled Substance Act, which is the master and original regulatory capture, which gives people these monopolies for a drug that's been around for over 100 years safely. We have a serious regulatory problem, and that's left and right. It's not just Don the Con. It's, the Democrats who are willing to sell out cannabis for tax dollars that absolutely are destroying us because the illicit market, it's not working. It's a disaster.
I agree. It's systemic. It's our entire system.
Fair enough. And on that, we're going to go to a commercial, and we're going to be right back.